You have your materials up. I am under administrative rule discussion for aesthetics and advanced aesthetics. I may refer to them in that manner, or I may refer to overall boards by COS for public ecology or CAE for advanced aesthetics, because it all gets a lot in your mouth to repeat. So in 2015, the legislature several who did more advanced aesthetics and mostly advanced aesthetics went to the legislature and said we need to have a board that regulates more advanced procedures in aesthetics rent. With that, they created the Board of Advanced Certified Aesthetics, which provided a definition for what that was, and so it allowed for lasers and other US FDA devices gave different modalities. When it put the US FDA devices in the scope of practice, we immediately jerked all those FDA devices out of the scope of regular aesthetics, which was not intended, but it was a consequence. So we knew that going in, we knew that we were writing the rules at that time for grandfathering, and then so that was the first rulemaking, and the second rulemaking was to get everybody who wasn't coming to grandfathering, because that was at the expiration date in 2019, cosmetology created a rule. It's a lot of type of services that estheticians can do, and limited to making the skin luminous, smoother. Really are kind of the artificial things right from the original top areas. So knowing that, and the unintended consequence of the original putting the advanced aesthetics board in place, a group of advanced estheticians and regular estheticians went to the legislature again in 2021. They actually went in 2020 in the short session, but I think the Senate. Something happened in the bill that passed. I can't recall what it was. Said it was a walkout. Yes, not that to say. So that didn't happen. And then we moved it over to 2021 when we got what we're working with now. So the reasons why we're here, what the bill did was for advanced aesthetics, it took that US FDA requirement out of the scope of practice for advanced aesthetics, plopped it into its own law saying, hey, advanced estheticians, you have to use the US FDA device. What it did is it now allows regular estheticians to also use those devices within what 2970 says, which is hold on. We can't device. 2970 limits estheticians. Well, that does two things. It provides some specific types of devices that can be used, apparatuses, appliances, electrical or mechanical apparatuses. Then it adds some specific actual procedures, types of devices, so galvanic current, high frequency, microcurrent, LED, and microdermabrasion. So to specify that had never been really honed in or specified. So I think it limited and it gave us some parameters as to what an esthetician can do. But it also did say that we can't use those devices. It can't penetrate beyond the epidermis except for natural physiological effects. You'll see when you guys review the rules, you will agree on that the Rules Advisory Committee asked for you to do that. So of natural physiological. Next thing, it also added, eyebrow services to the scope of practice of estheticians. In both boards, it says we will collaborate on definitions of device for estheticians and advanced. It added the 10 full slide, I should have done this in Uber, but I'm not, I'm sorry. To specifically, so it did just say, originally said lasers or other devices registered with the FDA. So now it says lasers, utensils, like those devices. We will register with the FDA, that is, use those as well. For non-livers. Those are kind of the main things that 2970 did, which the RAC has met now and wrote written rules and recommendations for you to review today. And we will schedule is. And it's always subject to change. I just changed it yesterday to add an additional meeting for advanced aesthetics on July 10th. So I'll go through the top. The Rules Advisory Committee met January 30th. And that meeting was, I would say, getting our footing meeting. We had some draft definitions, but it was really figuring out, the knowledge of what the RAP members knew, how we could help them understand how 2970 affected both scopes of practice, and then what different devices could or couldn't be in the scope of practice, there was a crossover. So it was just more of a learning experience. And then the March 27th meeting, they reviewed and approved the aesthetic and advanced aesthetic device rule to move forward to you guys today. And then on April 6th, they approved the natural physiological effect and the epidermis rule that you also reviewed today. So tomorrow we have, so as part of this rulemaking, we'll have to look at other rules that need to be reconciled. So that rule that says estheticians can't use FDA devices, they can, that one needs to be obviously changed. The definition of advanced aesthetics, taking out US FDA, so it's something you need to have itself. So tomorrow, how it's gonna work is we contemplated doing it now, having you guys meet, but we'd rather have a rules advisory committee do that. And when rules are proposed, it's only proposed down the road in October when you look at the permanent, they could change. So we didn't want to start rulemaking for those reconciled rules now. It started and then they changed down in October. So we're gonna wait and at your October meeting, we're going to have you approve the schedule, it's gonna be on the rack. So they're gonna come after these rules we're doing today, but I think it would be better in the long run. And if there's additional things that each board wants to talk about, then you have an opportunity to do that. Maybe redefining room, looking at a related, how can you expand on things? Cosmetology, we want to look at define dermaplaning differently or whatever. So it gives you an opportunity to also have those other things. That practice. August 1st, I'll put it in, I will file before that a notice of Secretary of State. So that is the document that it's e-blasted out to all of you. It's published in the Oregon Bulletin, which is the Oregon newsletter. I'm sure no one reads it. I don't even read it, but it's there for anyone to see. But we also send it out to everybody as well. Hopefully you get it. If you're not getting it, you don't have to write. So there's that. And then you have to be 28 days for public comment. I've needed about 45 meetings, the 1st through September 15th. And then in the middle of that, we'll have a public rule hearing. It's going to be a combined hearing, so It can be an esthetician, commenting and then an advanced esthetician commenting for the public. It doesn't have to be, I originally had it, all estheticians go first, all advanced go second, but, remember the recommendation, maybe we don't want to limit people if they want to come in the afternoon in the morning. So that was great idea. So you'll see it's from 9 to 4 with a 1 hour lunch. And then the October 23rd meeting, we will bring all the public comments that we received written, how the hearings officer report on all the verbal testimony we received, and then you will consider all of that. That is a requirement out of the board in the rules, statutes and rules. There is that. To consider it, think about it, but you don't have to take those comments and make any changes. So in October, you'll do that. We may make changes based on those things. We'll just have to wait and see. And then we adopt whatever percent you guys adopt. And then I would file a permanent rule that would be effective January 1. That's scheduled for 2 days, the 23rd and 24th. Maybe we're not sure. There's limited places to have it anymore since COVID. It's still closed down. There's now remodeling. There was like there was a downtown hotel and center in Salem, but very limited parking, not the greatest area. So this was the better option. And then permanent rules to be filed with some of the things that rules of advisory and didn't decide on: habitation, the document, regular aesthetics, macroneedling. Those things we may go back to the table. The collaborative law for both boards to collaborate on isn't limited to just one topic. So we get to reopen this later and keep deliberating over how we want those to play out. FAQs can be done. So if you have on our website or see your email, there's one for journal cleaning, there's one for chemical peels, one for airbrush scanning. So just kind of a question and answer about scope of practice. That's not, sometimes it goes into a, usually not. So there's lots of different ways we can handle specific devices. But at the end of the day, putting specific devices in rules becomes very problematic. I mean, microneedling has like 50 different terms. And listing. So it becomes different. So there's other ways we can get to some of those popular things: radio frequency, habitation, microneedling, original questions. With that, we've provided you with Angie. So that's the schedule. Any questions about that? We know you can email me, call me. Email's better. This all we requires a voicemail. I don't know when I'm going to check this. There's a flow chart that I find very helpful. Basically walks through the scope and it. So here's the procedure within certified aesthetics. You guys don't have this, but bring it home. Oh, that's not fun. I'll walk through it. So it is. Is it performed on the human skin or hair? Yes. No. No, it's not in the scope of process. Is it for the purpose of keeping the skin of the human body or face healthy and attractive, and not medical diagnosis or treatment of disease, physical or mental ailments? If it's yes, keep going. No, not in the scope. Is it a procedure that does for hair removal? There's a list of what those can be: sugaring, waxing, threading, depilatory. Thank you. That word. And use, so there's a list. Makeup artistry, is it eyebrow, eyelash services, or facial and body treatments? Facial, yeah, and body treatments. If so, excellent. Or actually, not. Or is it the big blocks, right? Is it the use of pins or mechanical or electrical devices or appliances or devices do not penetrate beyond the epidermis, except for natural physiological effects? So obviously that's the difficult of all the things for hair removal, except for hair removal, you know. So this is where we need to define more, say device and natural physiological effects. So if it's no, that's not in the scope. Yes, but it is. Is it in the definition of natural physiological effect? And these are for cleansing, stimulating, manipulating, exfoliating, applying versions of treatments. So those actual procedures, cleansing, stimulating, manipulating, exfoliating, are attached to an apparatus, device, all of those things. So that's how we can attempt it. That's your yes and no. It's no, it's out, it's yes. And when I say it's really see it. There's many things that happen when I try to walk this through. But usually it's not in anyone's doing. So advanced estheticians, is it performed on human skin or hair? No, it's not advanced aesthetics. Yes, keep going. Does it use a device? Let's see the definition that you will be looking at today. It is a device and it fits in the definition that we look at today. And it's not ablative, great, keep on going. If it's not, you're done. It's not. Is it an aesthetic modality? So in your law, it says that you can use medical devices. You can't do medical procedures. So a laser is used to do lots of things, right? Surgery, laser eye stuff. So you can use the laser, but can't do medical procedures for that. That's what that means. Instead of, it's like skin rejuvenation. If it's an aesthetic procedure, then yes, keep going. Not, you're out. And then have you determined if it's prohibited by another board, by statute or rule? I don't have a good example. That think, you like the medical board and the nursing board have like statements of philosophy, but not like this is great. You know, not that I know. So, and you have statement of philosophy, I would say is equivalent to a practice verification board. What is this? They have one for unlicensed healthcare providers, which in your guys' will be a medical assistant. Says if you have an unlicensed person, physician as an unlicensed person working in a facility, this business, and they delegate the work, everything that happens with that person is on their doctor's license. The gist of it. So we better make sure they're educated, trained to do everything. Which is why for estheticians, we have the hat, right? You do advanced aesthetics, you have your advanced aesthetics, you are your name tag, you need to make sure you're sending your chart that way, but you take your hat off and now you're giving your vaccination, me, your medical assistant. Your name tag, I know it seems, I'm assuming most of the time you're doing one or the other, but they have, and then your signs and trust. So we know that hat exists. We may be looking at something like that for COS. Because I think it probably happens in that. It's not prohibited by the board or statute of the rule that it's in scope. Yes. So with that said, we will go to in your finder, tab 9. No, tab 6. C. No, D. D. So this is the rules advisory. Yes. Oh, any questions? I apologize.
No, you said tab 6C?
6D. D.
Yes.
Nothing here, so blank.
Blank.
Okay, that's right. Because I just finished it this morning at 6. It's on the screen, which I'm doing. It's
Thank you.
a little bit I've already went over, but I will go over it again. Slow it down a little bit. Trying. Okay, so, didn't have this, it was not part of the rules advisory committee, but it's not in your binder. I did, which we go over today, but originally in 2021, this same scenario was started. And we had 2 meetings, and these were 2 meetings. I'm not gonna go into too much detail. There's committee stuff. That committee, those 2 committee meetings reports in your materials that I will resend tomorrow or Wednesday. It doesn't really, it's not part of this rulemaking, it's kind of, but because in 2021, the legislature passed House Bill 293, which required that for a RAC, whoever the agency or the decision-making body has people likely to be affected by the rule, communities likely to be affected, and individuals likely to be affected by the rule. So that using communities opened up a much broader spectrum of people that we get on the RAC. So if you guys remember, I had, well, not all of you there, but give you an issue statement. You'll see at the end of the year where I usually give you like a list of who you had before or who you determined before, but what community? So is it low income community, senior citizen community? So who can be affected? Small business. And if you tell me those are all communities that can be affected, then I have to do my due diligence to find those people who serve on the board. We're on the Rules Advisory. Not always easy, but we do try, and if we can't find them, we always documenting. It's a new law. We don't really know how things are going to shake out in the end, so document. Anyway, it's not for 2021 rulemaking. Fast forward in 2020, end of 2022, you guys did that. Community, she told me all of that, and then January 30th, first RAC met. And I think in my report, I tell you who was on the RAC. Colleen Long of Wallace, Whitty was on the RAC, she was an audience. I got only 14 applications. I wanted to make that really super clear. 14 applications from both aesthetics and immune system, or both boards. So 14 applications, and of the 14, 10 were chosen that met. In this same report that you'll get tomorrow or Wednesday, it lists what they self-reported as what community they were. Business, anytime. So January 30th, they met. You can already been over this. It was more of a where's everybody at session. We gave them guideposts that basically laid out how the law is written in scope of practice, so that it's basically asking the question, does it fit in the flowchart? Does it fit in the scope of practice? Does it piece of equipment? Things like that. This was also attached to several of the communications as a link to the audio. Assuming no one watched it, but I did for you. So it's all here. It's a draft. Heather, Bob, let's still review it. We met in March 27th, and the Rules Advisory Committee did land on the definition of device or advanced sufficient device, real sufficient device, using the flowchart and guideposts and all those things. There was a lot of discussion around training and education for those types of mechanical, electrical apparatuses, timeline for education, responsibility of knowing scope of practice that you're in, and possible violations by unsafe services. And in this, I gave you what the board, what the draft can agree to. The advanced definition, they weighed in on fiscal impact. So cost for institution to get advanced education, to get an advanced license, and kind of what I didn't put amounts, but these are things that would factor into the fiscal impact statement that I would write. The education at school, there's not very many schools, so do they have to travel? Do they have to quit their job? Do they have to have renting their place to live? Those types of things. This mission is performing services that, and then those services are no longer in their scope of those devices apparatus. And maybe choose not to obtain the education and maybe stop using those, and that kind of creates domino effect where they've stopped providing the services. Are they a small business and they employ other estheticians? So then they don't have things to do, that do they get paid off? So there's, ramifications when we start layering all these types of things. So this is all in the fiscal impact. If these devices they paid big money for, they're out of that, and those costs, things like that. So there's several things. And then in April 26th, we met and discussed the natural physiological epidermis definition. There was a lot of concerns about that regarding it was limiting estheticians to not be able to do certain things. And a lot of conversation around microcurrent and visibly contracting the muscle, which over the conversation of the meeting, and when the muscle contracts the microcurrent, there is some twitching, ordering, so the terms used, that are unintended. They're not something that the practitioner's trying. It just happens. So you'll see in the rules that you look at today that some of that has been reconciled in those rules. And the last thing that I actually provided what they looked at on that day and then what you're looking at today. I don't know if that's going to stay about it. And then fiscal impact divided was similar to fiscal impact in March. I'll probably expand on that at some point. So with that said, any questions about that long? Okay, then moving right along. Past that, this is the RAC report for in 2021. You're also going to, I just added it to the record, maybe a little bit of money. That was the page that you would have gotten in your placeholder for the RAC reports. So now we're just going to go right into the definitions. So I can walk through them, Tracy, you guys can just start with discussion, start asking questions, you can use it. You tell me how you want to do it, you want the want me to start and we'll go from there. So the definition of aesthetics device. So the first part is basically the law. This rule is considered 690.005.12, which is the definition of mechanical apparatus, device, all of that list. That was developed by Cross-Ecology and certified by the Board of Advanced. And then it sets for certain characteristics for an aesthetic device. So number one, just a lead, doesn't really give us any details. Number one is an esthetician is limited to performing services with mechanical or electrical apparatuses, appliances or devices that do not penetrate beyond the epidermis except for natural physiological effects as defined in AR, no number. So that one basically, it basically almost restates what the law says. It's these with mechanical apparatus, electrical, appliance, device, and you can use them as long as they don't penetrate beyond the epidermis. They can have natural physiological effects. Right. Switching the muscle, that type of thing. Questions about that? Two is an institution may use in mechanical, electrical apparatuses, appliances, and devices that are included but are not limited to the following. So A through D are listed. A through E are listed in the law. This is where they added galvanic current, frequency, microcurrent, lightning diode, LED therapy, microdermabrasion, or other devices, or other aesthetic devices. So that's where I'm in the departments that comes in. But this again, using this is just kind of restating the law, expanding a little bit, get into what. And then an aesthetic device must be either mechanical or electrical, be capable of and used for performing the following in care or facial care procedures, services. You'll also notice it sounds a lot like the flow chart. So cleansing, stimulating, manipulating, exfoliating, applying motion movements. And then A was mechanical or electrical, B was being capable of performing the services listed, and C is have the same risk safety qualification as galvanic current, high frequency microcurrent, high frequency microcurrent, LED therapy, and microdermabrasion. So what that means is can't be riskier than what those things do. So the laser. So it is a limitation that says you can only use, because it does say for other devices, those devices need to be similar to this, the safety, risk, and all those things. This limitation, but it's more specifically helps clarify what an esthetician would do. Any questions about that one? We also tell us an aesthetic device is not. It's not a laser. It's not intensive light, and it's not another aesthetic device specified in. What we've done is we've referenced what you're going to review in a little while. The item 3C, that was one of the changes we made since the April meeting. And then may not use a needle-free device for injection or dermal filler. So if you've been around, you have seen the FDA basically prohibition warning saying that hyaluronic pen is unsafe, use it. So since they prohibited it, we've also had it used it. So it further clarifies that no, you're not using any type of needle. And then the next question, and 5, is the esthetician do not perform skincare, facial care practices, or use mechanical, electrical apparatuses, appliance, or device, or medical diagnosis, or disease, mental health, repetitive, and what is. And the next one is the responsibility of the esthetician to ensure he's educated on those types of things. Not people the word that fits them on. Let's just say this. And then there's a rule that talks about what types of education you can get post what you get in school and how you get it, what you need to keep. And so that's what 817-010-0065 references. Will also be one that we're looking at in reconcile. And then number 7 is that an esthetician is responsible for determining what's in the scope of practice and what's not. So what they learned in school, reference that. That's kind of where your scope is. So you should be able to reference what you learned in school with what you can do outside Um, And then services provide, who's different bonds? If you're providing services that are unsafe or dangerous, there can be violations of the company, the religious, on professional conduct. And references the HLO law, that says, that defines, that talks about negligence. That's the aesthetic device definition. A question about that, should I go into advanced and that was for more discussion? That's one of my feelings. Just chime in, please. You need a briefing if you want to start. Oh, Rebecca, Kimberly, do you have any comments about that, or should I just move right along to advanced aesthetics device definition?
This is Rebecca. I'm good.
April, I don't see really behind the number of the digit.
We need to see the other 16. It's Kimberly on one of the 16.
I'm here.
Okay.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
And I can kind of. Okay, I'm right here. Yes. Can you see?
Okay, hear me, I thought you. Don't worry, I'm not talking. So I'm just gonna move right into advanced aesthetics device, which I think that was for conversation about aesthetics. So, the first paragraph again just says that both boards are collaboratively to define the devices for both structural environments. Number one is that an advanced esthetician is limited to using advanced aesthetic devices as follows. So limited to device services that are non-ablative. Then in 634, it gives you the list, skin rejuvenation, all of those things. Yeah, the definition of non-ablative, I'm sorry. Human 819005005 just restates what the definition of non-ablative is. There's two, advanced esthetician may perform advanced aesthetic procedures that go beyond the epidermis using advanced aesthetic devices. Listing 3 of his rules right below. So this is different from aesthetics, right? Because they can only go to the end of the epidermis. They can't go beyond it. And then an advanced esthetician can go down. So that's the distinction there. It's the distinction with only one of the most important ones. Those two things. An advanced esthetician device is a laser system intensive light or piece of equipment or mechanism that meets the following criteria. Shares the same risk and safety qualities as the laser intensive light, capable of performing procedures in the skin or hair, capable of performing procedures that are in conjunction with a modality, which is the loss and rejuvenation of those things, and be registered. So again, that's there as a requirement, but not as part of the school requirements. You got to use an advanced. 4 is an advanced esthetician device may not need greater risk compared to greater inherent risks than laser or intense lights. It can be more risky and give you services that are more risky. The advanced estheticians are responsible for being educated and trained. So this is where we might look at a rule that it's like regular estheticians that this is the type of training you need, and this is how you document that training. So a new rule that's where responsibilities. An individual certified in advanced and aesthetic procedures is responsible for determining what's in their Swiss practice and what's prohibited by law, which we talked about. I talked about services, also just like in regular aesthetics, services provided in devices used by The advances fiction are prohibited, are prohibited or unsafe, may result in violations of negligence, competence, and professional. So that's down short. Then, so, please, questions about that?
This is Rebecca. Sammy, if you go up a little bit on the screen there, are one of those a little bit, it seems like it's saying the same thing, number 4, and then if you go up a little higher there, sorry. And then it's I. Mm-hmm. Is that meaning to kind of just state it again?
Hold on, I'm reading it. That's basically, I think, the same thing. So yeah, we could look at aligning that better.
I'm just wondering
I mean,
because,
they-
you know, some devices that the CAEs use are definitely not, you know, having the same risk. They're or safety qualities. There may be less risk and different, you know, not quite the same as the safety qualities as the lasers. I don't know if that matters.
Say that again.
Well, some devices that the CAEs use don't have the same risk or safety qualities as lasers or intense pulse light devices, kind of like some of the high-fem lasers, or they're not lasers, high-fem devices out there have different, you know, as far as risk goes and safety qualities. That probably doesn't matter. Probably they're just trying to say that, you know, same or less, maybe.
Do they have more risk than those lasers or intense pulse light or less risk?
No, less risk.
If it's less risk, I think, and maybe we need to clarify that more. If it's less risk, then it's fine. It's when it gets into a higher risk. Where this
Right.
will come into place.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good question.
Less or the same is fine, but not greater than.
Yes.
Also, Christine out here, I feel like the intent is it's a little bit redundant, but I feel like the intent is a little bit different. Like setting the guideline for laser and then setting the guideline for intent of causing harm. It seems like it has a little bit of difference.
Yeah, I mean, I like number 4, how it says it may not be of greater risk or greater inherent risk. I just tends to not state that. Because some of the lasers, you know, require certain signage, whereas some of the hyphen, like for instance, the Emsella chair doesn't even have signage to go with it. So I would think of that as being in the safety realm. May not matter at all, but
The ones that don't have any signage, less risk or higher risk, or it could be both.
I would say I mean, the signage is for safety purposes, right? So you don't walk in a room and enter not in an NHZ, or, you know, you're not interfering with some kind of a radio frequency or something like that that you shouldn't be. So I would say it has less safety and less risk, some of these devices that we use. So maybe, I don't know if we need to clarify that or not, or just the fact they're different.
That's something that you want clarified. I mean, that's like what Chelsea said, if it's less than, it's fine. If it's greater than, I mean, if it's a question here, then it's probably going to be a question there. But it's
I mean, I think whatever leaves it open, but you know, we're not hedging ourselves in a corner either, because there's so many different devices that come out, especially these days, with different risks and safety factors to them. Although I think the lasers we use probably are in, you know, encompass most of that.
Rachel Anthony here. Would that kind of fall under an FAQ situation where we get into the finer points of, as long as it's lesser of our scope? That, I mean, because the signage is more for light issues when someone walks in and they don't have the correct eyewear, they could be at risk if they're in the way of the laser. So that runs into also like a third party walking into a room where some of these don't have that. I mean, it gets into very fine point details what the warning signs are for. And sometimes you just don't have light emitted where that's even going to be a consideration. The warning of the actual procedure, it's shaking paperwork where it's not going to necessarily matter if the person walks into the procedure to say something to you. For lasers, it does matter. So that could be something that we could work out in finer points with FAQs, possibly.
Yeah, and FAQs, it's much, obviously much easier to do examples. Yeah, it's this, it should be this, it's this, it should be this. I mean, there are devices like locks and tightening things. Absolutely. You can give the examples in a rule, but again, like you said, if it's super detailed, it's probably not. I wouldn't say it's the best place. You can do something. We're definitely getting that FAQ as well. Or we could say of something can be less than the risks of those majorly intensive or slight, but cannot be greater.
And I could be, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if for under CAE-COS definition, there's definitely parameters, right? When we're talking about estheticians looking to do performing services and it falls under a certain criteria, there's no language there for advanced aesthetics that say this is where.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
But we can't do medical procedures. So, making notes. Of course, we'll have to doing all these recommendations, and I'll look, and then in October, for we propose them. On rainy days.
So this is Rebecca here. I didn't quite hear what she had said. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so Tracy Tracy said that in the COS rules, the parameters are very specific. Don't go beyond the epidermis. But in the CAE, it's less specific. And I said what I had brought up in the earlier report that I gave, that an advanced esthetician can use medical devices, but can't do medical procedures, but so they're limited to that non-invasive. And you could write a rule that says that. I don't know why you couldn't.
Yeah, I think that it gets a little bit convoluted because obviously things like intense pulse light and micropulsed ND-YAG is used commonly by dermatologists to treat rosacea. And we use it as well to reduce redness and brown spots, hence dyschromia. So I think there's a lot of crossover there. So I think leaving it a little bit more open that's why we do that. Not that we're, able to diagnose or provide a medical procedure. I do have a question though. What about, we do body sculpting and that affects fat. And so, I'm not, there's so many different lasers out there. I know we have some infrared lasers out there that probably affect fat too, maybe differently. Is that encompassed in this verbiage?
that again. Sorry.
So a lot of our treatment devices, because they're body sculpting, affects fat. And so I know there is infrared lasers out there that also affect fat. So would that encompass this language, risk and safety quality of lasers and intense pulse light devices?
Affecting fat.
Yeah, like
yeah.
fat loss, like non-ablative, but affecting fat loss.
This is Christy now. The definition of ablative is total destruction. So I think it falls under body contouring. And it is a laser, or that's for the likeness of a laser. The manufacturers will compare them, and they're on the same, I think from a productivity standpoint and the intention, there may be a little difference in that depending on which modality it is, but I think they fall into a broad spectrum of that if the wording if the wording is.
So if it's not ablative, and it's an ablative is defined as total destruction, then we'd be in this practice.
What's the David Hadler, what's your definition of blade, total destruction of epidermis, creating a wound? So can you completely obliterate the epidermis without creating a wound?
Christina, you can completely obliterate fat cells without creating a wound, and that's
Okay.
why it would be in the scope of practice, and it's a form of body.
Are those, is there, this is how to focus on, is that a category of, that has a label?
This is Christy. I believe that clearly falls under body contouring.
But does the device have a label? If it's not a laser, does it have, is there a label for that category of device?
I mean, the one that comes to mind is like sculpting or cryotherapy. I mean, we haven't talked specific. We talked about the intent of the modality, like skin rejuvenation or body contouring, but we haven't specifically talked about every single way to get there, because I mean, we could go on.
Christy, this is Rebecca. I was just wondering if there was another word that we could put in there so that it didn't affect, anything in the future by accident. Because we know that, modalities and technology changes constantly. And so I don't know if we want to add the word, if there's something we could add, and that might be something that council could help on, as far as making sure that we weren't backing ourselves into a corner with this laser and intense pulse light device for risk and safety qualities for things like our body sculpting portion. Or unless you felt like that covered it and it wouldn't create a problem down the road.
This is Christy now. I think the issue really comes with there's so many numbers. I'm trying to figure out which, where you say the redundancy comes into effect, shares the same risk and safety qualities as lasers and intense pulse light device. I think where the caution comes for treatment providers is that you're comparing it to a laser when we know that all modalities. I think it has more to do with the intent, back to that original list of body contouring, skin rejuvenation. When we go back to that list, it has nothing to do with a laser per se. I think that's where we could shore up the wording a bit, potentially.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Because obviously we're
using a laser when we're talking about so many different modalities. I think that's a little bit limiting to compare it to a laser.
Maybe we could
Data
do, maybe we could do shares the same risk and safety qualities such as lasers and intense pulse light. I don't know. That would be a council question. Because obviously we're going to want to not wound them when we're doing those devices or using those devices.
So you would be saying clarify C little I. Is that right? To expand that those safety qualities would be using other types of devices other than lasers and intense pulse light for a plethora of modalities.
This is Christy. Now, if we could even just add or other, like shares the same risk and safety qualities as laser, intense pulse light, or other devices.
Other
I think it could
Yeah.
have to be a little bit broader.
Yeah,
Defining
that would be
the
good.
device. Don't have other. We're telling you what other means, which, well, if we use the mechanism of legislative intent, then they've told us intense pulse light and lasers are in, but there's other devices too. So when you look at the intent, you assume that that they circle back to this is what the types of devices that you're allowed to use, and so the legislature has said these are it, and other devices will be sent. Kind of like when you see including but not limited to red, blue, yellow, green. Dog, 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 cat, cat doesn't, something similar in those areas, that makes sense.
Christina, can you say included but not limited to laser and intense pulse light devices? I really like that.
David, how can I offer maybe another option? So
Yes.
would you, to loop it back to the aesthetics device definition, could you just put share same risk to safety qualities as lasers, intense pulse light device, and then tie it into mechanical or electrical apparatuses? For that in aesthetics, as opposed to using this open-ended or other, you're defining specifically intense pulse, laser, mechanical or electrical apparatuses.
I think the reason, I could be wrong, that the RAC landed on these, so that those other devices, whatever they are, so the advanced esthetician was, okay, here's a device. Is it super risky, way more risky than a laser? Then I probably can't use the flow chart, I can't. But if it's similar, not exact, similar, then I probably do. So it's just, it's what it's trying to do is give you some parameters and but not box you. Does that make sense? I mean, I suppose you could add other device, but it's still going to be the same thing. It's still going to be, doesn't share the same risk of the two things I've said. Like in aesthetics, you can do LED, you can do microcurrent, you can do undercurrent, or you can use other devices that share the same characteristics, safety, risk, blah, 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 as those. Or less. Yes. That makes sense. Interesting. Yeah. This is confusing. I totally understand that. These are great questions.
Yeah, David, I think the challenge is giving yourself by rule flexibility to address emerging technology or applications that you're talking here about, you know, fat reduction, whatever, I'm not an esthetician. And not get yourself so tightly constricted or prescribed for a listing of things that you want to do. I don't know how much shoring up you need to do with this. I don't know.
Chelsea Westcott, even if something new comes out and it is more risky than a laser or an intense pulse light, it would still not fall within it. So basically the laser and intense pulse light gives you that point of what is worse and what is okay, like your ground zero essentially to work from. So I feel like even if new things came out, you're still gonna measure those new things by this, rather than trying to create room for something that's riskier.
This is Tracy, very similar, I was gonna say, it's like laser and, intense pulse, is that gonna be the max at the ceiling?
Right.
Right, like that's the limit, that's as far as it can go. And, I think the only, concern in this, obviously, I'm not an advanced esthetician, but concern in language to me is like, we're kind of leaning a little bit into like, trying to read the future, what's gonna come out, what technology is gonna come out, that we wouldn't say is more dangerous or is more intense than these two things, but something completely different. Who's to say what's more dangerous at that point? It's a very subjective term to be like, well, is it as dangerous or is it less dangerous? And that's kind of subjective, which is that's the dangerous part for me, is like, there's some room for somebody to be like, well, no, it's not as dangerous. I'm like, well, this is new technology. How do you know?
Let me ask a clarifying question, Rebecca. Are you saying, I'm trying to reference back what you said about the dermatologist using a device for rosacea, but an advanced esthetician using it for scromia reduction? And in that regard, is that where you're trying to get that you are going to use a device that could do more, but you're doing it to a limit? So is this rule saying you can't use that device at all because it's risky?
No, I don't. I was just referring to the comment about medical services, because in actuality, we do the exact same thing that a derm would do or have their laser tech do. It's just we're doing it for dyschromia, which is reds and browns, not a diagnosable disease, right? So that's the only thing I was referring to on this. This one, I was just wanting to make sure we weren't, really creating problems for ourselves in the future, just because looking at things like cool sculpting, for instance, it's, I would say that it has, less risk than lasers. But somebody else might say, okay, since you are, destroying a fat cell, they might say that's not the case. So I just was trying to make sure that we were really thinking about how we were presenting this, and if everybody felt like it was keeping it somewhat open, because I know the board will clarify in FAQs as well as other ways, things that we've already have history on, we've been doing, and also the intent of this. But I just wanted to double check to make sure that we weren't that we were really thinking about how we were phrasing it. And then of course for new technologies too that come out.
Thanks for the question. Yes.
So this is Heather Nicholson, so I just have a question if this would capture what I think I'm hearing. If what were changed to state shares the same qualities as lasers and intense pulse light devices, such as risk and safety qualities, would that capture it? So does what you're describing, the mechanisms, devices, do they have other qualities that are similar to lasers and intense pulse light, even though we took out the risk and safety and put that at the end? Would that capture that device?
This is Rebecca. I think that would be worse because, like, for instance, cryolipolysis has nothing to do with lasers whatsoever. I mean, I don't know of any lasers personally, I could be wrong, that create cryolipolysis. There might be some out there, you never know. But so that's I think the way it reads is probably better than changing it, because otherwise you would have to find a laser that created cryolipolysis or the reaction thereof. Now I know there is some devices that use infrared that are supposed to affect you know, apoptosis or at least I don't work with those, so I would have to defer to somebody else that maybe has more experience on that.
Another clarification, Rebecca. Are just trying to figure out exactly what the issue is. So if I'm hearing you right, are you saying that like cryolipolysis, it does something totally different than a laser, right? But I don't think that's what this rule is saying. What this rule is, we're trying to say, is that cryolipolysis is fine to use as long as it isn't here forming surgery or taking away 7 layers of skin as a laser. So it's not saying you can't use something different. It just can't be riskier than that. You can't do anything riskier than laser, like completely destroy 17,000 layers of the skin. Does that make sense? So you can still do cryolipolysis, absolutely, if it's in your children. But can it cause the same type of, does it cause the same, is it riskier than compensable site relations? You can still use it, but how is it, will it, like I said, create something worse than what a laser is? Does that work? Does that get it? Is that what you're asking? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I guess I'm just being the devil's advocate and trying to find out, like, if, if we're hedging ourselves in here with new devices and different things, because you might have one person that, thinks nothing of a little petechiae from a laser, but yet from a, there might be other instances here. And that's all I'm trying to make sure that we don't do as things start to evolve and change, because, perhaps causing apoptosis is, not something that other lasers do, or the safety mechanism of that. Maybe somebody would question that as far as risk and safety goes. And maybe not. Maybe this is just fine the way it reads. And I think if the RAC is the one that came up with this, they probably thought of all those things. So maybe when it comes to interpreting the rules, that this is fine. I just was trying to understand it better.
This is Chelsea Westcott. Not to blur the two, I apologize for this, but to use as an example, in the base esthetician number 6, it is the responsibility of the esthetician to be trained and educated on mechanical and electrical apparatus, appliances, and devices used and procedures used in the practice of the esthetician. So basically saying the esthetician is responsible for using that device or mechanical apparatus within their scope. Are you wanting something like that within the accountability? Okay.
This is very good. Like, I think there's like, are we trying to define what we're regulating as safely now? Or are we trying to define what we're trying to regulate as safety in the future? Like trying to not box somebody in and trying to not limit what we're doing. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, is trying to make sure that where we are right now, we're operating safely with the machines and technology that we have right now. And I think that it's our responsibility to actually not box people in, but create very clear boundaries about how far we can go, so that we can have this discussion later when new technology comes up in different ways of operating. But it's our responsibility to give people a very clear boundary. This is how we operate, these are the parameters that we're operating inside.
Yeah, and you want to make it riskier, I think legislation would change. For legislation would have to be made.
Well, I think the defining line with CAE and COS are devices that are similar to what's already stated in statute for COS, and devices that are already stated in statute for CAE. And that's what that's trying to get at. So does it share safety and risk qualities similar to the laser and intensive light? Not the same. Or would it be something that shares the same safety and risk qualities as the things that are stated in the COS statutes? So looking at it in that way, is there a way to clarify that language to get that idea across so that, you know, the high frequency microcurrents, safety qualities, whether those are different and things, and how do we identify that in the rules?
Can you mute, please, whoever, one of the board members said?
Must be boring to watch.
Probably.
Kimberly, can you mute yourself? Rebecca?
I'm having a hard time hearing the background noise.
This is Christina. I agree. I think we need for public safety and just, for scope, we need a top end, and I like that. I think that wording's great.
David, however, would it be helpful to say greater health risk? What kind of risk are we talking about here? You're really talking health risk, right? You're gonna damage skin, you're gonna do whatever. Would there be any value in adding and not be of greater health risk?
This is Christina. Health is, I mean, that seems like we're getting into out of our scope a bit.
So, 15, yes, so everybody in the public, we're gonna take 15 minutes and get lunch. Then we're gonna come back and work and eat, so that will be interesting for me. Depending on where you're at. Yes.